Huawei was supposed to fail. After losing access to Google services and facing growing uncertainty around Windows, most people believed the Chinese tech giant had reached the end of the road. Its smartphones suddenly lost the apps millions relied on every day, and its laptop business faced an uncertain future as access to key software and hardware became increasingly difficult. For most companies, a setback like this would have marked the beginning of the end. But Huawei didn't disappear. Instead, it spent the next 5 years quietly building something almost nobody believed it could pull off. What started as a desperate attempt to survive has now grown into one of the biggest challenges Microsoft has faced in decades. Today, Huawei's own operating system is no longer limited to smartphones. It is now powering laptops, tablets, smartwatches, cars, and countless connected devices, placing it directly in competition with Windows in the world's largest computer market. If this strategy keeps gaining momentum, the next major battle in technology may not be Android versus iPhone. It could become a fight over who controls the software running on hundreds of millions of computers. Before we dive into how this happened, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We spend a lot of time researching these stories to bring you the complete picture, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. To understand why Huawei is suddenly becoming a serious name in the computer world, we have to go back to one decision that completely changed the company's future. In May 2019, the United States government placed Huawei on the Entity List. At first glance, it sounded like another political headline, but for Huawei, it was a turning point that changed everything. For years, Huawei had become one of the world's largest technology companies. It sold smartphones in dozens of countries, built telecommunications equipment used by major phone carriers, designed advanced networking hardware, and invested billions of dollars into research and development. It wasn't just another phone manufacturer. It had become one of the biggest players in global technology. Then, everything changed almost overnight. Being placed on the Entity List meant American companies could no longer sell certain technologies to Huawei without receiving special government approval. That single decision created problems across nearly every part of Huawei's business. The most visible impact came from Google. Modern Android phones depend on something called Google Mobile Services. Most people never think about it because it works quietly in the background, but it powers many of the apps people use every single day. Services like the Google Play Store, Gmail, Google Maps, YouTube, and countless third-party applications all rely on this system. Without Google Mobile Services, Huawei's phones sold outside China were technically still Android devices, but they no longer delivered the experience customers expected. Buyers quickly realized they couldn't simply download their favorite apps from the Play Store, and many essential Google services stopped working altogether. As a result, Huawei's international smartphone business suffered almost immediately. Sales dropped sharply across many overseas markets, costing the company billions of dollars over the following years. But while most people focused on Huawei's smartphone problems, another challenge was quietly developing behind the scenes. This one involved personal computers. Unlike Google's restrictions, Microsoft never announced a dramatic public ban on Windows for Huawei. However, new export rules made it increasingly difficult for Huawei to obtain the advanced Intel and AMD processors that most Windows laptops depend on. At the same time, Microsoft's relationship with Huawei became increasingly uncertain. It wasn't a sudden ban, but a slow squeeze. New regulations made it harder to secure the hardware and software needed for Windows laptops, making long-term planning almost impossible. Huawei's leaders quickly realized this wasn't a temporary setback. The company had become caught in growing geopolitical tensions between the world's two largest economies, and there was no guarantee things would ever return to normal. The challenge was enormous. Huawei had already lost Google's ecosystem on its smartphones, making it difficult to compete outside China. Now its laptop business faced uncertainty over Windows, processors, and future software support. Few companies could survive losing confidence in both markets at once. But instead of asking how to restore access to American technology, Huawei asked a different question. What if it never needed it again? That idea changed everything. Rather than relying on technology controlled by others, Huawei decided to build its own. It was a massive gamble, requiring years of engineering, huge investments, and an entirely new software ecosystem. Most companies would never attempt it, but Huawei believed true independence was worth the risk. That decision became the foundation of a 5-year project that would eventually challenge Microsoft's dominance in an unexpected way. At first, Huawei's new operating system didn't seem like a serious threat. Just 3 months after the US restrictions, in August 2019, the company introduced HarmonyOS. But the first version launched on a smart TV, instead of a smartphone, and many critics dismissed it. Software experts also found that it still relied heavily on the Android open source project, leading many to call it little more than a rebranded version of Android. But Huawei had a much bigger plan. Behind the scenes, thousands of engineers spent the next 5 years rebuilding the system from the ground up. Their goal was simple: create a fully independent operating system that no outside company or government could control. That effort paid off in 2024 with the launch of HarmonyOS Next, which completely removed Android code and became Huawei's own operating system. More importantly, HarmonyOS Next wasn't built just for phones. It was designed to run across phones, tablets, laptops, smartwatches, smart home devices, and even cars through one unified ecosystem. The trade-off was significant Android apps no longer worked automatically, forcing developers to create native HarmonyOS versions. But Huawei believed full independence was worth the sacrifice, and once HarmonyOS Next was ready, the company turned its attention to an even bigger target: the personal computer. For decades, Microsoft's Windows has dominated desktop and laptop computers around the world. Businesses, schools, hospitals, banks, and government offices have all built their systems around Windows, making it extremely difficult for any competitor to break in. But China offers a unique opportunity. As the world's largest PC market, even a small shift away from Windows could have a massive impact. After Huawei's experience in 2019, many Chinese organizations began asking whether critical infrastructure should depend so heavily on software controlled by a foreign company. That conversation became even more important as Windows 10 reached the end of its support lifecycle. Instead of simply upgrading, many government agencies and state-linked organizations were encouraged to consider domestic alternatives. The timing worked perfectly for Huawei. After 5 years of development, HarmonyOS Next arrived just as millions of computers were approaching their upgrade cycle. Huawei has already introduced HarmonyOS-powered laptops and desktop systems with support for office software, file management, printers, enterprise security, and other everyday business tools needed for a smooth transition. Huawei's strategy isn't to replace Windows everywhere. It doesn't need to dominate the United States or Europe. Instead, its goal is to establish HarmonyOS across China's enormous domestic market. A user base that large can attract developers, businesses, and software companies, creating a self-sustaining ecosystem. The company is also expanding into Southeast Asia, the Middle East, parts of Africa, and Latin America, where Huawei already has strong relationships through its telecommunications equipment. In many ways, Huawei isn't just selling an operating system, it's offering countries greater technological independence. Windows remains the world's leading PC operating system, and that isn't changing overnight. But Huawei has shown that another path is possible. Whether HarmonyOS becomes a global competitor or mainly succeeds in China, one thing is certain. For the first time in decades, Microsoft's dominance is facing a serious long-term challenge.